When humanity walks away from the Galactic Confederation, the alien council that once feared their ambition suddenly finds itself powerless to stop the very destruction they tried to contain. The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with the low murmurs of hundreds of alien representatives. The massive dome-shaped room with its polished surfaces and soft blue lighting had hosted countless debates over the millennia, but today's session carried a weight unlike any before. At the center of the chamber stood Ambassador Chen Lin, the last human representative to the Galactic Confederation. Chen's face remained impassive as she scanned the tiers of alien delegates surrounding her. After 20 years of service, she knew most of them by name. The four-armed Zeta diplomats with their shimmering scales, the gaseous Mavorians contained in their environmental suits, the towering insectoid Kalari. For 2 decades she had navigated their politics, formed alliances, and advocated tirelessly for humanity's place among the stars. High Counselor Vexari, an ancient Thessalian with silver-blue skin and 6 eyes arranged in a crown pattern, raised a slender hand for silence. The chamber gradually quieted. Ambassador Chen Lin of Earth, Vexari's voice resonated through the chamber, amplified by unseen technology. You have requested an emergency session of the full council. The floor is yours. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Chen straightened her midnight blue uniform bearing the Earth insignia, a simple globe encircled by olive branches. High Counselor, esteemed representatives of the Galactic Confederation, I come before you today with grave news. After careful deliberation and by unanimous vote of the United Earth Government, humanity has decided to withdraw from the Galactic Confederation, effective immediately. The chamber erupted. Delegates rose from their seats, some shouting in their native languages while translation devices struggled to keep up. Others simply stared in shock. In the 3,000 years since the Confederation's founding, no species had ever voluntarily withdrawn. Vexari's voice cut through the chaos. Silence. The chamber reluctantly quieted. Ambassador, surely this is unprecedented. The Confederation has provided Earth with protection, technology, and access to trade networks that have helped your people flourish. Chen nodded, her expression still controlled. And we are grateful for those benefits, High Counselor. However, the restrictions placed upon us have become untenable. For 50 years, humanity has abided by the Confederation's limitations on our development. We have dismantled research programs, abandoned promising technologies, and accepted your assessment that we are too aggressive, too unpredictable, and too dangerous to be trusted with our own advancement. From the Dravid section, Ambassador Kultok rose. The reptilian diplomat's scales flushed a deep orange, a sign of agitation among his kind. Your species was found conducting weapons research that violated 16 separate provisions of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The restrictions were necessary and proportionate. Chen turned to face him directly. The research you refer to, Ambassador Kultok, was into defensive shield technology. Technology that 3 council races already possess but refuse to share. We sought to protect ourselves. Your shield technology could easily be modified for offensive capabilities, hissed Zilvax of the Meridian Collective, her tendril-like appendages writhing. Humans always find ways to weaponize everything they touch. Chen's jaw tightened momentarily before she regained her composure. That perception, that humans are uniquely dangerous, has colored every interaction we've had with this council. We have been denied colony rights on 17 habitable worlds that sit empty to this day. Our AI research has been capped at levels that most of you surpassed centuries ago. Our ships are subjected to random inspections at 3 times the rate of any other species. She paused, looking around the chamber. We didn't come here to argue our case again. The decision has been made. As of 0600 Earth Standard Time this morning, all human outposts in Confederation space have begun evacuation procedures. Within 30 days, no human will remain within your jurisdiction. 3 weeks later, The observation deck of the UES Horizon offered a panoramic view of the massive Exodus fleet. Chen stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching as thousands of human vessels, from massive colony ships to small private transports, assembled in high orbit around Saturn. The gas giant's rings provided a dramatic backdrop for what media outlets were already calling the greatest migration in human history. Admiral Hayato Ishida joined her at the viewport, his weathered face reflecting the distant light of the sun. At 62, Ishida had spent most of his career commanding Earth's defensive fleet, often chafing against Confederation restrictions. The Keter last transports from Proxima Centauri just arrived, he reported. We're at 98% completion. Only the research station on Europa and a few diplomatic outposts remain. Chen nodded. And our destination? Ishida activated a holographic display between them. It showed a region of space well beyond the Confederation's borders, in what the aliens called the void sectors, uncharted, unclaimed territory that the Confederation had deemed too dangerous to explore. The survey ships report that the Nashira system is exactly as our probes indicated. 3 habitable planets with abundant resources, no indigenous intelligent life, and far enough from Confederation space that they won't bother us. He paused. Of course, there's a reason they haven't expanded in that direction. The void sectors aren't exactly stable. Chen's mouth quirked in a small smile. You mean they're frightened of what might be out there? Precisely. The Confederation has always been risk-averse, that's why they never understood us. Ishida deactivated the display. President Okafor wants to speak with you before the final broadcast. Chen followed Ishida to the communications center where a secure quantum link had been established with Earth. President Amara Okafor's hologram materialized, a tall woman with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that reflected both determination and the weight of her decision. Ambassador, Okafor greeted her. How are our people holding up? As well as can be expected, Madam President. There's a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Many are leaving homes they've known their entire lives. Okafor nodded solemnly. And the Confederation? Any change in their position? There's still an emergency session. The economic implications of our departure are starting to sink in. 7 member species have already sent private communications expressing concern and urging us to reconsider. But no concessions on the restrictions? None, Madam President. High Counselor Vexari remains convinced that easing the protocols around human expansion would set a dangerous precedent. Okafor sighed. Then we proceed as planned. The final evacuation of Earth begins tomorrow. I'll be on the last ship out, along with the remaining government officials and military personnel. She paused. History will judge whether we made the right choice, Ambassador. With respect, Madam President, we've tried their way for 50 years. Perhaps it's time we found our own path among the stars. After the communication ended, Chen returned to the observation deck. The fleet had grown, now nearly 10,000 ships strong, carrying 25 million humans to their new home. It represented less than 0.25% of Earth's population. The rest would follow once the initial colonies were established. She watched. Chen thought about the Confederation's warnings that humans were too aggressive, too ambitious, too willing to take risks. Perhaps they were right. But those same qualities had taken humanity from stone tools to the stars in a mere 12,000 years, a pace that had alarmed the more ancient species of the Confederation. Let them fear us, she whispered to herself. Soon enough, they'll miss us instead. 6 months after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council convened for what had become a weekly crisis session. The Grand Chamber, once a place of measured debate and careful diplomacy, now resembled something closer to a marketplace in chaos. High Counselor Vexari struggled to maintain order as Ambassador Threll of the Sovonic Trade Federation continued his impassioned speech. And without human innovation, our pharmaceutical sector has seen a 28% decline in new formulations. The avian diplomat's crimson plumage was fully extended in distress. The humans might have been unpredictable, but their research teams produced more breakthrough medications in a decade than our scientists develop in a century. Ambassador Kleetok, who had once been among the loudest critics of humanity, now sat in uncharacteristic silence. His trading conglomerate had lost billions after human entertainment networks went offline. It turned out that alien species across the Confederation had developed quite an appetite for human music, art, and particularly their immersive storytelling. What humans called movies and video games. Vexari finally restored enough order to speak. We have reviewed the latest economic projections. The departure of humanity has indeed created unforeseen complications. However, the security benefits— What security benefits? Interrupted Ambassador Drelxa of the Mantidean Hive, her chitinous mandibles clicking in agitation. While we've been debating, 3 separate incursions from the void sectors have occurred. The humans maintained listening posts and defensive positions that deterred such intrusions. The chamber fell silent at this revelation. For decades, the Council had criticized human military readiness as needlessly aggressive, overlooking how those same forces had quietly secured trade routes and border regions that other species considered too risky to patrol. There is also, added Ambassador Lur of the Phosian Enclave, his bioluminescent skin pulsing with each word, the matter of the Kryvax situation. Murmurs spread through the chamber. 2 months ago, the notoriously aggressive Kryvax Dominion, a non-Confederation power, had tested Confederation resolve by seizing a small mining outpost. In previous decades, such moves had been quickly countered by the human fleet, often without formal Confederation authorization. The humans had developed a reputation for responding decisively to bullying, which had kept the Kryvax in check. But with humanity gone, the Confederation's response had been a series of diplomatic protests, while a committee studied potential actions. Meanwhile, the Kryvax had seized 2 more outposts. Perhaps, Lur continued delicately, we were hasty in our judgment of human methods. Vexari's multiple eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of extreme stress in Thessalians. The Council made its decisions based on established protocols for species integration. The humans were an outlier in nearly every behavioral metric. And yet, came a new voice, those outlier qualities are precisely what we now find ourselves missing. All eyes turned to Elder Norsama of the Qualon, one of the oldest and most respected species in the Confederation. The ancient being, appearing as little more than a shimmer of light within a containment field, rarely spoke at council sessions. I have observed 17 species join the Confederation over my lifetime, the elder continued. None adapted as quickly as humans. None innovated as rapidly. Yes, they were frustrating, always questioning, always pushing boundaries. But that drive is what we now lack. Vexari seemed to age before the Council's eyes. What would you have us do, Elder? The humans made their choice. They made their choice after we left them no others. The Elder replied. Perhaps it is time we considered our own mistakes in this matter. 9 months after humanity's departure, the first major crisis struck the Confederation. The Kryvax Dominion, emboldened by the Confederation's weak responses to their previous incursions, launched a full-scale invasion of the Tannhauser system, a crucial hub for trade and manufacturing. The emergency session of the Council had been ongoing for 3 days with little progress when the doors to the chamber burst open. A bloodied Zeta messenger stumbled in, collapsing before reaching the central podium. Tannhauser has fallen, the messenger gasped as medical personnel rushed to his aid. The defense fleet was overwhelmed. The orbital platforms have been destroyed. Ground invasion has begun. The news hit the Council like a physical blow. Tannhauser wasn't some distant outpost. It was a core system, home to over 12 billion citizens from various Confederation species, and less than 20 light-years from several homeworlds. This is impossible, whispered Ambassador Zilvax. The Kryvax don't have the military capacity to take a core system. Admiral Grex of the Confederation Defense Force stepped forward, his exoskeleton clicking as he moved. Intelligence suggests they have deployed new weapon technologies. Technologies we've never seen before. Our standard shield configurations were useless against their main batteries. How long until they could reach Thessalia? Or Zeta Prime? Asked an ashen-faced Vexari. At their current pace of advance, weeks, Not months, the admiral replied. The chamber descended into panic. Representatives shouted questions, demanded evacuations of their homeworlds, or simply froze in shock. Bexari's calls for order went unheeded. It was Ambassador Kultok who finally cut through the chaos. "We need the humans," he said, his voice carrying an uncharacteristic tremor. Silence fell as the implications of his statement sank in. "The humans?" repeated Bexari. "They've made it clear they want nothing to do with Confederation affairs." "Then, we must give them reason to return," Kultok insisted. "They have always responded to direct threats. If the Krivaks conquer the Confederation, how long before they turn their attention to human space?" Elder Norsama's containment field drifted to the center of the chamber. "Ambassador Kultok speaks wisdom. Moreover, humans have consistently demonstrated one quality above all others. They protect those in need, even at great cost to themselves. It is both their greatest strength and what we feared most about them." Bexari looked around the chamber, seeing the fear in the faces of species that had known peace for millennia. "Very well. We will attempt to contact the human government, but I caution against excessive optimism. We spent decades telling them they were too aggressive, too militaristic. Why would they now deploy those same qualities to save us? The diplomatic shuttle bearing the Confederation's emergency delegation dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Nashira system, transmitting continuous peace signals. They had expected defense platforms, patrol vessels, perhaps a small fleet. What they encountered instead left them speechless. Hundreds of warships of designs the Confederation had never seen before formed a protective sphere around 3 thriving worlds. Massive space stations with shipyards far larger than anything the restrictive treaties had previously allowed humanity to build orbited the outermost planet. Sensors indicated energy signatures that suggested defensive capabilities far beyond what the Confederation had believed humans capable of developing. "By the Eternal," whispered Delegate Friel of the Tassian Unity. "How did they build all this in less than a standard year?" Ambassador Kultok, who had insisted on leading the delegation despite the risks, stared at the tactical display. "Because we weren't holding them back anymore," he replied quietly. A communication request flashed on their console. When accepted, a familiar face appeared on the main view screen. Ambassador Chen Lin, now wearing a uniform with different insignia than before. "This is unexpected," she said, her expression neutral. "What brings a Confederation delegation to human space?" Kultok stepped forward. "Ambassador Chen, Defense Minister Chen now," she corrected. "Defense Minister. We come seeking urgent assistance. The Confederation is under attack by the Krivaks Dominion. They have deployed technologies beyond our capability to counter. Tannhauser has fallen and multiple core systems are threatened." Chen's expression didn't change. "I'm familiar with the situation. We maintain observation networks throughout the region formerly known as the Void Sectors." "Then you know how dire our position is," Kultok pressed. "The Council formally requests human intervention and offers to renegotiate all previous restrictions on human development." A flicker of something, perhaps satisfaction, crossed Chen's face before disappearing. "I will convey your request to President Okafor and the Defense Council. In the meantime, you are permitted to dock at Nashira Station Alpha. A liaison officer will meet you there." The communication ended abruptly, leaving the delegation in uneasy silence. "Did she seem unsurprised to anyone else?" asked Delegate. Friel Teeltalk's scales had shifted to a thoughtful blue-gray, almost as if they were expecting this to happen. 26 hours later, the delegation was escorted into what humans called the War Room, a massive operations center deep within Nashira Station Alpha. 3-dimensional tactical displays showed the positions of Confederation and Krivaks forces throughout contested space, updated in real time through means the delegates couldn't identify. President Okafor, flanked by military officers including Defense Minister Chen, greeted them with formal correctness rather than warmth. "The Defense Council has reviewed your request," Okafor stated after minimal pleasantries. "We have decided to intervene against the Krivaks Dominion. Visible relief spread through the delegation, but Okafor raised a hand. However, we have conditions. Her gaze was unyielding. Humanity will not return to the Confederation. We will act as an allied power, not a subject species. All restrictions on human development and expansion are to be permanently rescinded, and we will retain any Kryvax technology we capture during the conflict. Ambassador Kultok stepped forward. Madam President, some of these terms exceed my authority. Then contact the Council, Chen interrupted. But be aware that our intelligence suggests the Kryvax will reach Thessalia within 17 days. Our fleet requires 5 days to mobilize and deploy to the front lines. The Council has approximately 12 hours to decide whether our terms are acceptable or whether they prefer to face the Kryvax alone. The terms were harsh, but the delegates knew they had no choice. After a brief but intense communication with the Council, Klytok turned back to the humans. The Council accepts your terms, he said, his voice carrying the weight of a civilization that had just acknowledged its dependence on a species it had once deemed too dangerous to trust. President Okafor nodded once. Defense Minister Chen will coordinate with your forces. I suggest you prepare your people for what's coming. Human methods of warfare may be unsettling to species accustomed to the Confederation's more measured approaches. As the delegation was escorted out, Kultok lingered behind. Minister Chen, he said quietly, there's something I don't understand. How did you develop all of this so quickly? Even without our restrictions, this level of military buildup should have taken decades. Chen's smile was small but distinct. We didn't start building when we left, Ambassador. We started building the day we joined the Confederation and realized what we were dealing with. We just kept the true extent of our preparations hidden. But the inspections were thorough but predictable. We showed you exactly what you expected to see, a compliant species struggling against your restrictions. She gestured at the war room around them, all while preparing for the day when those restrictions no longer applied. 3 weeks later, the combined fleets of the Confederation gathered in the Helios sector, the last defensible position before the core homeworlds. Despite committing every available ship, the Confederation commanders knew their forces were outmatched by the advancing Kryvax armada. Then, precisely on schedule, reality seemed to tear open along the system's periphery. Not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands of human warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Vessels of every size, from nimble frigates to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in the Confederation Navy. At their center was the UES Horizon, now heavily modified and serving as the fleet flagship. Admiral Ishida's voice came through on all Confederation frequencies. Confederation vessels, this is Admiral Hayato Ishida of the United Earth Defense Force. Fall back to the designated coordinates and regroup according to the tactical package we've transmitted. Human forces will engage the Kryvax vanguard. The Confederation commanders hesitated. Decades of viewing humans as dangerously unpredictable made them reluctant to cede battlefield control. But as the first wave of Kryvax warships entered the system, they had little choice. What followed wasn't merely a battle, it was a demonstration. Human vessels moved with a coordination and precision that shocked their allies, executing maneuvers the Confederation had deemed theoretically impossible. Their weapons bypassed Kryvax shields using principles the Confederation scientists couldn't begin to comprehend. Most surprisingly, the humans deployed automated combat drones by the thousands, technology explicitly forbidden under Confederation treaties. Within hours, the supposedly invincible Kryvax vanguard had been reduced to floating debris. Not a single human capital ship was lost. On the observation deck of the Confederation command carrier, the military leaders watched in stunned silence. How? Began Fleet Commander Ziv of the Zeta. How did they become so advanced without us? Noticing, Defense Minister Chen, who had joined them as liaison, looked out at the battlefield. You saw what you wanted to see, Commander. You focused so intently on controlling our aggression that you never considered what that aggression might achieve when properly directed. She pointed to a tactical display showing the next phase of the human counteroffensive. The Kryvax made the same mistake. They observed the Confederation's reluctance to engage and assumed all species shared that hesitation. They weren't prepared for an enemy that has been fighting wars against ourselves and others for our entire history. "And now?" asked the commander. Chen's expression hardened. "Now they learn why every predatory species in Earth's history either adapted or went extinct. We don't just fight, we finish what we start." Over the next 2 months, the human fleet, supported by Confederation forces, systematically pushed the Krivax back, not just from Confederation space, but beyond their original borders. The Dominion, which had terrorized the region for centuries, collapsed under the sustained human offensive. When human forces captured the Krivax throne world, the Dominion High Command surrendered unconditionally. For the first time in known history, the Krivax acknowledged defeat. 1 year after the defeat of the Krivax Dominion, representatives from across known space gathered on Nashira Prime, humanity's new homeworld, for the signing of the Interstellar Concordat. Unlike the Confederation, with its hierarchical structure and restrictive protocols, the Concordat would be a genuine alliance of equals. The ceremony took place in an open-air amphitheater, overlooking a valley where a new city was taking shape, a chai blend of human architecture and alien influences, symbolic of the collaboration the Concordat hoped to foster. President Okafor and High Counselor Vexari stood side by side at the central podium. Their relationship remained formal but had evolved into something approaching mutual respect. "Today marks not an ending, but a beginning," Okafor addressed the assembled dignitaries. "The Krivax threat united us in common purpose, but it is our shared vision for the future that brings us here today." Vexari stepped forward. The Confederation's approach to governance was born in an era of caution. We sought stability above all else, sometimes at the cost of progress. In our fear of humanity's potential for destruction, we failed to appreciate their equal potential for creation. He gestured to the human city rising in the valley below. In less than 2 years, they have built what would have taken us decades. They have developed technologies we deemed impossible. And yes, they have demonstrated military capabilities that still disturb many of us. The Thessalian turned to face Okafor directly. "But they have also shown restraint when they could have demanded vengeance and generosity when they could have claimed conquest. Perhaps there is wisdom in the human approach after all." Later, as the formal ceremonies concluded, Chen Lin found herself approached by Ambassador Kultak. The Dravid diplomat had been among the most transformed by recent events, from one of humanity's harshest critics to one of their strongest advocates. "Defense Minister," he greeted her, scales shifting through colors that indicated both respect and lingering wariness. "There is something I have wondered since the war ended. Your forces could have defeated the Krivax without our help. Why involve the Confederation at all?" Chen smiled. "Conflict is only one path to growth, Ambassador. Cooperation is another. Humans understood something the Confederation never did. True strength comes not from restriction, but from challenge." She looked out over the valley where humans worked, alongside dozens of alien species on the expanding city. "We needed you as much as you needed us, not for your protection or your technology, but for the perspective only other civilizations can provide." Kultak considered this. "And the future? Humans are now the dominant military power in known space. Some species still fear what you might become." "As they should," Chen replied candidly. "We remain what we always were, capable of both great creation and terrible destruction. The difference is that now we have allies who understand both aspects of our nature, rather than trying to suppress half of it." She extended her hand in the human gesture of friendship. After a moment's hesitation, Kultak extended his scaled limb to meet it. "To new beginnings, Ambassador. To new beginnings, Minister Chen. And to the stars we will reach together." Above them, the first ships bearing the new Concordat insignia, a stylized galaxy with Earth's ancient olive branches encircling it, departed for destinations unknown, carrying mixed crews of humans and former Confederation species. Not merely exploring but seeking, building, and when necessary, fighting, together. The universe, it seemed, was about to become a much more interesting place.